I think we're live. We're live now.
There we go.
Yeah,
Right.
we are post Google meltdown. We're here at NAA with Amy Mark, and we found the most dull room in all of Las Vegas. We're in an empty conference room that has literally white walls. It's like an insane asylum. We're quite happy.
Very quiet.
Very quiet with a minor echo. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Getting to Hell Yes, I'm with Amy from Center Space. Recently at Center Space.
Recently, like 2.5 weeks in.
And thrilled. I caught you and Chris Moreno's and Adrian's podcast a few weeks back. I think it was
a couple months ago, actually.
Yeah,
at this point. Yeah.
Time flies.
I know.
It was so fun listening to you guys. Anyways, hell yes, we're always talking about the new buyer's journey, right? And a lot of the conversations that are beginning to reveal themselves, both on the external sales and the internal sales side of things, is that hell yes is a lot about change. And how do we get people to compel them to change, whether you're acquiring new customers, whether you're trying to get a project sponsored, initiated, or whatever. All these things are about people's willingness to pursue a change in their life based on where things are at. That's where the hell yes comes from, because we're kind of past the world of telling people what to do. And, you see that emerge itself in a lot of performance deficiencies, right? Like, we tell people to do things, or we ask people buy things they shouldn't buy, and they don't use it, and all these things. It just it makes for bad experiences. And so, conversation, how everyone listening today, if you have any questions, please ask any questions. You can ask us about NAA, ask us how it's 130 degrees outside. It feels like we're frying, and what's going on. Appreciate anybody's input. We were at NAA. Great to connect with this in person. These things in person are always so much better.
Way better. Yeah.
And this is brought to you by IRCX. We're AI remote maintenance software to help you know before you go and save yourself some triage and trips. So, as we always kick these things off, I hope the echo isn't too bad on the recording. Amy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Tell us a little about yourself and how'd you get this role at Center Space?
All right. Well, I'm first going to apologize for day 2 of NAA, and I've lost my voice already because we're having this much fun. It's going to get worse tonight. But no, so I've been in the industry about 20 years now. Started as a leasing agent, just like many of us, fell into it, couldn't escape it, and just worked my way up from there. All it takes is the right personality and the right person to recognize, your talent, which is really just being outgoing and having good customer service vibes. So I recently joined Center Space, like you mentioned when I last spoke, or I guess when you last caught my podcast, I was in between jobs. So I had been with Embry for about 5 years and had a very sudden change that ended up being such a blessing for me. It really made me take a step back, take some time off, and reflect on the fact that I needed work-life balance. I was on a plane every week, and that was
you mentioned that.
Yeah, I was not conducive to my lifestyle. Wasn't good. And so I recently bought a house, and then I just accepted a job with Center Space. And the biggest focus of making that change was the culture that Center Space had and getting that balance back. And that was the primary point in any interview I had was, what's the balance? Will I be home? Am I traveling? What does this look like? So here I am. So 20 years later, worked my way up, was RVP at Embry, took a step back to regional director at Center Space, and I've never been more excited to make that change.
What's interesting about your leasing agent story, right, is this is one of the things that, a lot of people like to beat up this industry for pick your topic. But the one thing that this industry has done very well is women in executive roles. Right. And I guess I've said this on the show a couple times before, and I think it's because of the career path that you just talked about, right? It is a revenue focused industry. And the leasing role is an entry level role for a lot of people who are friendly and good customer service. And it's pretty impressive, like in the grand scheme of things, when you look at these organizations and the amount of women leaders, it makes for a huge difference in the way the industry runs, the way these companies run. And I don't know. I mean, of all the things that this industry gets beat up on, I think that it should take credit for the amount of female leaders that are out there, because it doesn't happen. It's not the same.
No, it doesn't. And it's really exciting though, because this is actually the second company I've worked for that's had a female CEO. Gables was the other. And it's just such a different dynamic as far as when they're on site, when they're present, and the details that they know about you. And, I have yet to meet Ann Olson with Center Space, but I've heard nothing but positive things about her, and that when she walks through the door, she knows your name, even if you're brand new. And you just don't get that very often. And it's not to say that men don't do the same thing, but it's just, there is something in female nature. We're just a little more
maternal.
Maternal, personable,
maternal.
Just something, we want to get to know people, and that's just what we do naturally. So,
well, I think it's interesting about this business is that's part of the business, right?
It is.
I mean, the thing that you hear people struggling with over and over again is, how do we begin to retain this human touch
Mhm.
and do it economically,
Yeah.
right? And the part that I think it's really struggling with is this kind of this realization that the casual human touch may not be doing the job anymore
Mhm.
because it's not intentional. It's
Right.
just kind of like it's casual. And with the roles, the number of open job positions, the amount of growth in this industry, there just simply isn't enough to, you can't be just casual anymore. It's got to be
No.
intentional.
It absolutely has to be intentional. And I think, the speaker this morning at the general session here actually was talking about that. He was talking about how human interaction is
Mhm.
necessary and that people, satisfied is not actually a good thing. Satisfied means you're basic. It's simple. You want to
It's 6
go,
out of 10.
yeah, you want to go above and beyond. You want to make it memorable. And especially working in people's homes, we want to make you feel important and that you belong there. And it is a sense of belonging in your own home.
Yeah.
So it's almost necessary to go out of your way, especially in a world where there is so much technology at our fingertips, but we can't forget the basics.
Totally. Do you find that like in Center Space, so where you're going there, like you went there for the work-life
Mhm.
balance and then you realize you had Montana in your
Yeah.
in your area of responsibility. But do you find that, and not to say anything negative about anywhere you worked
Mhm.
before, but just the pursuit of a work-life balance might also be something that's indicative of what's out there from a human touch perspective for the residents and for the organization, right?
Yeah.
Like I've talked to folks at Center Space before, and it did come off to me as being a different company than other ones that are out there.
Very much so. And the one thing I recognized off the bat after doing all my site visits in the last week and a half has
Mhm.
been come as you are, literally come as the person you are, represent your true self, express what's important to you, be involved, don't be involved. The world is kind of your oyster, which is really exciting because and it's not to say that you can't have that elsewhere, but they make it such a dominant quality in the people that they bring on. And so I think it gives people more runway than they even anticipated for themselves.
Right. Well, it's interesting when you talk about authenticity. I had this conversation with Tony Souza. I had it just this week with Rocky Garza.
Mhm.
When you're authentic to yourself, and I think that it's actually when you have permission to be authentic to yourself,
Mhm.
right? It's a lot less work.
It really is because you're not focusing on all these little details that don't really matter. You're
Right.
focusing on the actual impact you can make by being who you are and being genuine and being authentic. And that's one thing I've really prided myself on over the years. And that I've said in all my interviews I had is that I'm not the girl that's going to come buttoned up in a suit. I mean, I'll throw a suit on if you really want me to, but the reason I get along so well with my clients and my employers and my team is because I am who I am.
Yeah.
I'm going to laugh with you. I'm going to joke with you. I might cuss sometimes. We're going to have a good time because we're ourselves.
How did you figure out who you are?
I think, I had a lot of imposter syndrome for a while. So don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
That was certainly there. But I think one thing about me is I'm naturally outgoing. I would like to say I'm witty, and I think I just have this, this ability to be genuine and connect with people very easily. And I've just run with that. I left the industry briefly and I did sales. I was great at sales, but it wasn't for me. I like the contact that I have in this industry, I like that human touch. And so I really came into my own in this industry by growing up in it. I spent the last 20 years of my adult life being in it and getting to learn what I can do, what I can't do, what people like, what they don't like, and just continually improving myself along the way. And I think that's what I love about this industry. I am highly educated. I have a master's degree, but there's so much continuing education here that's not focused on a technical skill set. It's really focused on soft skills. And that makes a huge difference in our day-to-day life and what we do with our residents, our clients, and our team members.
It's I think that's part of the thing that this industry is suffering through right now is that it's trying to figure out how to take that what was casually kind of performed by site staff and make it part of the corporate structure.
Yeah.
Like John Carlson from Mark Taylor last week was talking about a lot about how they're very, very clear about the culture and values of the organization. And those culture and values are not just like, on the wall. There's something that they build in every sales presentation, right? It's a core differentiator in how they win.
Yep.
And he's, he's a CEO. And so like the things that he talks about, like you could just hear it from him that it cascades through the rest of the organization.
Yep.
Because that's the way that they've chosen to operate.
If
right?
you
They've chosen to win that way.
Absolutely. If you put it front facing, where everywhere you turn, you're talking about your core values. People see it. They want to live by it. Something that I shifted my focus to a few years back was whenever like we get, reputation management's king, right? We're all about it. We have reviews going on everywhere. And when my teams get good reviews and their name dropped in it, we want to celebrate that. But I like to tie it back to the core values because sometimes they don't always see that they're living and breathing those core values. But then the second they see someone else recognizing it, they're like, okay, the dots are connected. Now I get it. And now I understand what you guys are looking for. And it really makes a difference. But if you don't live, eat, and breathe those values, then you're not representing the company the way you should.
Yep. I think, and then it's also goes, the reverse is also true, that if you don't exit for value violation, right, then you're not holding, that's also withholding your values.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Interesting. So so the move to center space and your role there, so you've got you said RM or
A regional director.
Regional director.
Yep.
Sorry, regional director.
Yeah.
And of course you got multiple states. When you get into that space there and they are publicly traded. So how are you preparing differently for that role?
You know what? It's not really preparing differently. The job is truly the job. And I've got a place in my career where I can just jump in. And that's the one thing I really love so far is like working with my boss, Jamie. She's like, you got this, go do it. I'm here if you need me. I'm definitely one that asks questions. But one thing that I'm noticing is different is everything's in writing. And not to say it's like a by the book in writing, but we have to have this information available. This is how this policy is run. Here's where you find it. This is how you operate. Here's where you find it. And I think that's very helpful because one thing that lacks in a lot of companies is, we have virtual training, we have live training, we have in-person training, but it's only as good as the repetition of it and actually people absorbing it. And I think one thing that Center Space does a really good job of is the visibility and the transparency in their training. And I do believe that's necessary when you're publicly traded because you report to a board of directors. You have to have that information out there and available. And so it's actually making my job easier because I have so many more resources at my fingertips to refer back to.
Right. And then when you go to enforce those policies, you've got something that you can refer to. It's not just something that you're making up. It's actually a corporate structure.
Yeah. And I'm big on the why. Like one thing, a lot of people that will say that have worked with me before is I'll never tell you no without giving you a why behind it. It's a rare day that you're going to get it because I said so. I'm going to give you an explanation. We're going to work through it together. I want you to challenge me and I want you to challenge the policy. Because that's how our policies and procedures get better is when we challenge them and look at alternative ways to do them versus working around them. There's a million ways to get from A to Z and we're going to find them. Yeah.
So when you take a look at your career along the way and in part of the getting how yes conversation, like you've had to make initiatives along the way and you've had to, so kind of like we'll do two steps of it in terms of like, talk about an initiative and then not so much the initiative, but like, how did you frame an idea or a campaign or something that you wanted to run and do? And how did you frame that and get that sold internally?
Sure. I think a great example of that is actually we have these, the rent algorithm ban they're trying to put. I think it actually just got vetoed.
In Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was a big panic point. But with it, no one's giving out information anymore. We're not doing market surveys anymore. You can't just call up the property next door and say, what's your occupancy? What do you have available? No one's giving it out because we're all so sensitive. And so our teams were getting frustrated. They couldn't put their market surveys together. I was working in new construction and that market data is necessary when you're in a lease up property. So it's how do we find that info? What do we do? And then I had to take a step back and say, okay, do I want the market survey because it's what I've always known? Or do we really actually knit and what pieces are really valuable to us? And so when I put that together with Embry, we started using a third-party platform for it, which was Apartment IQ. And Apartment IQ would scrub the website, so only as good as the data available. And then I took that and streamlined it down and said, okay, here are the key pieces that we can get from Apartment IQ. And if we do make that phone call, here's what we might be able to get. And so we got to a streamlined version of the market survey that took my teams 20 to 30 minutes versus a few hours of waiting, slimmed it down and said, this is still of value, but only these pieces. We're not going to be wasteful of our time. And then made it more efficient. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from traveling so much is, I'm very paperless. I don't need paper for anything. I need efficiencies. I need to have everything at my fingertips. So if it goes from phone to computer, to being in a room, that's what's necessary. And so that's what this market survey really did. It made us efficient and it gave people time back in their pocket, which is what we need to be with our customers more.
So interesting, great story. So I think the interesting thing to dig in a little bit is that you're faced with having to achieve an objective or in terms of pricing out the building, right? And you had a gap in front of you in terms of I don't have the pricing data. I used to rely on this market survey data for it. And you went and you got innovative in terms of solving that problem with a different way of doing things, right? What about when things are just going smooth?
I think there's always ways to improve. I mean, that's one thing I'm very passionate about being on the operator side is that there's always a way to do something better or different. And when I say better, I don't mean reworking the entire problem. I just mean finding ways to streamline it. And so it's not that you go in and you want to change everything, but you go in and say, okay, how can I make this better? How can I make it smoother? How can I make it easier? And I really try to approach everything I do that way, whether it's for myself or for my teams, because I do believe there's opportunity in everything. And so if I find something going on and it seems like it's going well and I don't see anything major to change, then I'll walk away. I won't change it, but I
Yeah.
will ask my team, how do you feel about it?
Mhm.
Because they may feel differently than I feel about it. So it's not always about making a change, but it is about constantly reevaluating what you're doing and what processes you have to make sure they're still really functional.
How do you prioritize those changes?
To be honest, I feel like they just come across your desk naturally.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out how to, give yourself time for them. And so, one of the things of me when I was traveling so much is I didn't have time for that. I didn't have time to create these efficiencies that I really wanted to, but I knew they were necessary. But it's like when you got your break and you had your time like to cool down, you're like, I just want my break. I don't want to dive into another project.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so right now, one thing I'm really challenging myself with, and again, being brand new to Center Space and 2 weeks in and still learning as I go, is I want to make sure that I'm setting really healthy boundaries for myself. So I can tackle this, but do I need to right now? What does that look like? What is that time frame that I should actually evaluate it? Taking on Montana region, it's let's do a warm-up call first, then we'll do a transfer in July. Let's not move things too quickly. Let's do it the right way so we're not rushing everybody just to rush everybody. Another thing is I don't want to look at my emails in bed anymore. I don't want to wake up, have my alarm go off and open my phone. So I'm really challenging myself to wait, get ready, get to my computer or wherever I'm at for the day, then look at my emails, because if there is a fire or an emergency, they're going to call me. There's no reason I need to be in my email.
I'm finding I'm actually, I don't even open my email in a full day.
Yeah.
I'm in CRM or I'm in my calendar. And so it's interesting when you talk about outbound and reach out to people and just the selling cycle, like the calendar is where everything is run.
Yes. Oh, right? Yeah. That's my to-do list.
Yeah. It's your to-do list. And so I'm even finding that I look at my calendar, I try and plan out my week in terms of strategic projects I want to achieve in that week, and then look at the calendar and make sure that I've got the time allocated to do those projects or the people that's dedicated to those projects. And getting better at the people part. That's a part that's been hard. Yeah. But we've got some good people right now in our team to be able to do those things, and didn't necessarily have them before, or even worse, I didn't trust the outcomes.
Fair enough. Yeah. And then I think we all have that. We all have folks that you're just not quite sure, but you want to spend time with them. I wrote an article in the Apartment Trends magazine like last month or month before, and it was talking about the time you're spending with your people. You need to spend just as much time with those who are maybe struggling or a little behind the curve to those who are ahead of the curve, because you have to put effort into all parties in order for everyone to grow together. They can grow at a different pace, but if you don't spend time with both, you're not going to be successful on either end.
Well, and the helpful part is by having transparency around expectations.
Yes.
Then you can actually see, you can formalize that gap closure.
It is. And that's the big thing on accountability is it's hard for both parties, right? You have the one person that you've said, okay, here's what we need to do. Here's what we're working on. But then you have me, who's, I guess we can call me the enforcer. But with that, you would really just have to say, okay, here's the expectation. Here's when maybe it's a deadline. Here's when it's due by. Here's when we're going to reconnect. Here's when we're going to go back and reevaluate everything. If it's a performance plan, if it's a project, whatever it might be, but it takes two to be accountable. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest piece of it is the transparency and setting really solid expectations.
Do you expectation settings and it's what I'm finding interesting is that all these things, right? I'm actually starting to do that with customers, or prospects.
Oh yeah.
With prospects. So I've done I made this habit change about 4 or 5 months ago, where we record every call, but then I also turn that into download the transcripts, put it through GPT. Yep. And then, you may or may not be familiar with sales methodologies, but take the sales methodology and then map it to that. And it used to be stuff you kept internally. Yeah. In terms of gap closure that I had to solve internally. Right. Then I share it with the customer. Oh yeah. So here you go. So we use SPICE framework. So here's the situation, here's the impact, here's the champion. And from our conversation, you're not the champion. And I'm okay saying that. Oh yeah. Instead of trying to pump somebody up who's acknowledging that they're not the champion. Right. Because if they are the champion, then I want to hear them say, excuse me. Yeah. I'm writing the check. Right. And so things like that, I'll actually boom, put that all out there and share that transparency with them, because I want to set expectations to them. This is we're not here, I'm friendly. Yeah. But I've got a lot of friends already. Right. And it is business. At the end of the day, it is business. Yeah. It's still relationship building. I mean, that's a key part of this industry. It is all relationships, and I think we have all these programs right now that are making the leasing person and the customer there are two parties, and you have this middleman. You have this AI device. You have income screening. You have verifications that are in the middle, but we're still here, and the customer still wants to hear from us. But we have to work with this department here and make it feel fluid and streamlined and warm and welcome. And it's really hard to do that if you don't set very clear expectations from the beginning and say, if you do this, you'll get this. If you don't, you'll get this. And with the customer. Yes, and it's hard because a lot of it, I'm using income as an example because we're all using these third-party verifications because fraud is so prevalent. Yeah. And so with that,
that we have to say, here's how you do it. Here's how you avoid getting flagged for fraud. Here's how you download it. Some folks are better than others. So you really have to have best practices. Your teams have to be familiar with those best practices, and they have to be able to communicate them to the customer. And if you don't, you're going to have someone frustrated before they even finish the application process. And that is our worst case scenario.
Because you're trying to fill units, right?
Yeah, we're trying to fill units, and we're trying to make it feel like home.
Yeah.
I mean, it is transactional, it is a business, but it's still their home. And that's the gray area that we live in multifamily.
It's funny you bring that example up, because like you take a look at that whole experience of applying for a lease, the number of steps that the resident has to go through to, and clicks, like we're trying to eliminate all these logins, but we're throwing more logins on it,
right?
And more personal details they have to submit, more unconventional approaches. Like it's not just your credit score anymore; it's your banking information, all those sort of things. For people that in an industry where there's a 50% turnover, right? And so like having to provide that information over and over again is pretty intrusive.
Oh, and it's always been intrusive. No one has ever liked the application process. I remember back in the day when everything was paper, it was, I don't want to put my social security down. Now it's self-service. Now everyone can do it themselves. So that part feels better. But then it's, why do I have to attach my bank account? I'm like, well, I got to make sure you have money. But you're giving away all these details. But what's really interesting is that's already in the auto industry. Like when I went and bought a car last year, they were like, oh, you don't need pay stubs. We just connect bank account and do this. I'm like, oh, for me, it was easy breezy. I actually loved it. I was like, the less I have to get you, the better. And I'll connect whatever. I guess I'm very loosey-goosey on that. I'm like, it's fine. You're going to take my identity, take it. But I think
you would have taken it by now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You would have found it by now and you would have been very unexcited about it. But no, I think, there's in other industries that are doing the same thing we are. And it's just, people don't think about it that way. They're like, well, this is unique to this industry. It's not. It's just all coming full circle, like slowly and gradually.
We use the exact same language all the time. Like the thing that like realized, like I was overcomplicating the explanation of what we do. And so, now all the time I talk about, telemedicine, teleinsurance. I say, hey, look, this has been around. Like, I'm a copier. We didn't innovate anything here. We just copied it from someone else and brought it to the family, because like it was a straightforward. There's a gap in the marketplace for pre-existing technology. And sure, some things we had to invent, but by and large, if you were to stand back through 30,000 feet, we're copying from something else.
Well, imitation is the best form of flattery when you really think about it, as long as you learn and tweak from it.
Sure. Well, and it also, I mean, I don't know if there's another an analog to it, but like if you're copying something else, it's a whole lot easier for people to understand why it's there. Right. So like you said, the car example, right? Like the car example is a great, generally most people will have had to apply for a car at some point in time, or some sort of major equipment, right? And in that or major asset. And so in that case, they have an experience around it that you can say it's just like this. They go, oh, okay, I've done that before. Right. And I've done that before, kind of like opens the mind up to change within this context. Right. Because the context is what creates it, makes it a little bit different. Yeah. And so those examples are easier to convey in terms of getting people to commit to change. Because like it's tough. Like as humans, we really don't want to do things that we're not used to doing. Oh, 100%. And so like, even the fact that you're seeking a new lease, that in itself is uncomfortable and a different way, a change that you may not want to seek. And so however we can make it as easy as possible, like but balance the compliance elements that need to be achieved in order to make sure you're filling the building with the right people. Totally. Well, and I'm the worst also. So we use locators heavily in Denver because we're so saturated in our market. I work in this industry. Sure, I could go find my own apartment, but I'm going to go use locators because they make my job make my life easy. I give them what I want. They give me 5 buildings. I go look and I have a new place by the end of the day. And I was a renter for the last 10 years. And so I needed those services because it made my life easier. It made my life more efficient, and decisions just came naturally. So I think, so that's kind of my process and how I do it. So, but people don't want to accept new. I'm one of those people. I think change is good until it happens to me. Then it takes me a minute to adapt to it. But I mean, there's just a lot of similarities and crossover. I mean, I even go down to like the key system. We use KeyTrack was a program I used for years. The auto industry also has that. And I had no idea. And I found that out a couple of years ago and I was like, oh, so we have so many similarities out there, but you don't always see it as the end user. So, well, it's funny. It's a great, similar example. So to me, for the first time ever, I'm using a keyless hotel room. Oh yeah. Which had no line check-in. Yep. Which is amazing. Right. Right. Yep. So, but I mean, I've been checking into my flights for like 10 years, I don't know, 5 years. I mean, on a phone to that. Like, and we're very trusting of that. So why can't we trust a hotel key on our phone? Exactly. And it's so easy. Yeah. Because it actually has my room number on it. Right. which is very helpful in
It's
Vegas.
incredible. I had to text my friend our room number today. She was like, I keep forgetting it. I keep looking for 63, but I went to the wrong floor. And I'm like,
I know. It's so helpful in Vegas. So it is interesting. And I think that with respect to this industry, there's so much technology that can be ported over from other industries that have already been tried, true, and tested.
Right.
To solve problems that were already solved in the industries,
We just got to learn how to apply it. We got to learn how to apply it differently. And I think, we all hate talking about the pandemic, but let's be honest, as terrible as it was, it forced a lot of good changes in how we do business, because multifamily was is archaic. It was kind of archaic. We did the same thing over and over again. This was the expectation. The pandemic forced us to get out of our comfort zone and do things differently. First it was, you're not personable anymore. You have to take away that because we're all 6 feet apart and we can't get close to each other. But then all of a sudden, human contact was craved again. And so we start doing our job differently. We realized our teams can be remote sometimes. Like for instance, Centerspace moved all their assistants off-site. It's a remote position, which I actually love because the bulk of their job is data entry and bookkeeping and talking to residents on the phone. And you don't need to be in the office to do that.
No.
I mean, the residents still want to be facing sometime, but then that's the job of the manager to come out and be that person and be that warm and friendly vibe. And same with leasing and maintenance. But I think, it challenged us to say, okay, we don't need to be this hard. We don't need to be 8 to 5 every single day. We can have some flexibility as long as we're delivering the key component, which is someone's home and a human connection. Because those residents, they just need us to be available sometimes.
Well, and the human connection thing is an interesting one to kind of thread on, because I think it's either EQR or UDR. I can't remember. It's one of those two has totally 0-person buildings.
I want to say EQR's equity, right?
Yeah, equity.
They were moving a lot of people off-site for a while. And I'm not sure, and UDR, I haven't worked with them in a long time.
Yeah.
But
I just remember one of those. Nonetheless, there's someone out there that's doing it. That's big.
It is.
And they're realizing that the human connection can be just your neighbors.
No. Well, and I think this whole thing with centralization, it's like you're trying to make us more efficient, which I understand, but you cannot get rid of the human connection. We are an industry that needs to always have a human front facing, but there are things that we can take off site and move around and make easier and move to third party. But we have to monitor that third party, like even the voicemail systems, or not voicemail, the live agents that answer for us after hours. They're only as good as the information that we give them and the training that they have. And so garbage in, garbage out, right? And I think it's really and that is also something different about Centerspace, is that it's not my conventional structure I'm used to. Even at the leadership level where I'm at, they have a different structure of who handles what and who's at what properties. And it's a nice change of pace. I went the standard route. I went leasing, assistant, manager, regional, and so forth. But I have friends now that went leasing, manager, skipped the assistant role, went over and did some marketing stuff. Now they're in corporate. And I think it's nice to see the shift that it's not linear. We are not linear at all. And with this new change of moving things off site, we're even less linear than we thought we were, and more capable.
And does maintenance, because we were just talking about this last night, does maintenance roll into the regional director role, or does it just roll into a regional operation?
So it depends on the company. There's actually very few companies that have regional facilities managers, is typically what they're called. So in most cases, you kind of get stunted, and then you have this VP level over here that you're kind of working towards. But what's funny is we need that regional facilities director. We need that locally in almost every market, because our teams really rely on that person to kind of help them do, the bidding and the scoping and kind of elevate that level of service that we're giving, because they don't have the right training on that. And so I do think we have a gap in maintenance on that side to give them the proper growth platform that the office team has. Now, I think there's always crossover. I'm actually working on a project with the association on industry storytelling. And some of these people went from office to maintenance, maintenance to office. And it's cool to see that track path, which is what we're going to start highlighting so people know what's available in our industry. But I also think, we have to, I guess, create a linear path, but also give it options, like where you can go off to the side.
Yeah, I think that, ultimately, there's a bit of discovery that has to happen, because it's not a lot. It's not a path for everybody, right?
No, it's not.
And there's something to be said about the cross training as you're going through it, right?
Yes.
Because what often is overlooked is, while it is a revenue, it's a rent business, it's also an asset business, right?
Yep.
And so if we're worried to just rent the whole time, we're not really worried about the asset. Now I realize that the asset's valued based on the rent,
right?
But at the end of the day, there is a building that needs to be maintained, and that building is worth something.
It is. And those folks need to make sure they have the right education. So something I've always done is I use the apartment association to help me get my teams trained up, because when you work for a smaller company, when I say smaller, 10 to 15,000 units is typically where I enjoy working. Those companies, you don't have a local presence in every single market. You have remote locations, just like Montana is. And so you have to use your associations to pick up the training gap that you have. And that truly is their purpose. And so, one of the things I'm on site engagement committee. And with that, it's how do we get the site teams more involved? How do we let them know what the association has to offer? How do we get them passionate about what they can do to grow themselves? Because we have so much continuing education. It's just a matter of making sure they know where to find it and then utilizing it as an asset. And I think that's another key piece where we're starting to create these learning tracks where it says, okay, you just got promoted to a service manager, or maybe you were tech to a service. Here's some classes that are going to help you grow into that role. Same thing on leasing to assistant to manager, because some of the skills you need are the soft skills. It's not the technical skills, it's the soft skills of how to be a leader.
Do you find that, so as you're kind of looking at the opportunity you have, you're starting at Center Space, like, and you're looking at the metrics that you're seeking to manage and monitor towards, because all this stuff has to arrive to a point, right? So where do you, when you're what's going to be your metric that you're going to monitor, like weekly or daily?
I guess not weekly or daily, but tenure is huge. And I think our multifamily has a lot of turnover, and especially in the last few years, because it got a little harder. Residents got more challenging, then clients got more challenging, and we get beat up a little sometimes. So tenure makes a difference, because someone who is lasting with you, they feel valued, they're getting the culture that they want, they have an impact. That makes business easier always, because they're more well-versed in what they're doing, and they're passionate about what they're doing, and they feel like they're, like I said, making an impact. And so I think, that's what I do. The longer my employees stay, the less turnover I have. That's number one.
It's
less headaches. It's less costly. Operational expenses go down. But then outside of that, I really look at, my reputation management. Like I mentioned earlier, I think these resident reviews, we can see through them. I know when someone's mad, there's going to be 12 typos in it. I mean, I can tell they're mad. And so
you can hear the keys.
You can hear it. And I'm a passionate typer, but like you can hear the frustration, but then you also can pick through what's real and what's not. And so I love reputation management as a training tool, because I think there is opportunity in everything. You could get the best review, and then I can go and use that and say, look at what they did customer service wise. Let's apply this, because we haven't maybe done it before, or they looked at it differently. Let's apply this. Or I can look at it and I can see the mad resident and where we missed. We didn't communicate well enough. We weren't efficient. We owe them something. So I can then take that. So those are my day-to-day metrics, I would say, is reputation management. I mean, we roll everything up to KPIs every week, every month, but I think those two things, tenure of training and then reputation management, give me the most real-time info that I can use on a daily basis with anyone I work with.
Interesting. And then when you look at your two markets, just two, or, I mean,
just two. Yeah. So I'm in Denver and Montana.
So like different markets. Like almost different. Completely different.
From what I've been told, yes.
So how are you going to reconcile that? Like, or maybe a better way. Do you think so? Okay, explain both markets.
Okay. So, well, actually, where's I'm going to do? I'm going to go, when I was working in Colorado and Arizona, two vastly different markets, both oversaturated at this point. So they started to catch up to each other, but very different in the beginning, because rents were going backwards in Arizona, in one of my markets, but rents are skyrocketing in Denver, And so you have to just engross yourself in the markets, get familiar, go to the trade shows, and, meet your vendors, create those relationships in both of them, see your comps, use CoStar, use all the data that we have at our fingertips, but jump into it. You have to read it to get familiar. And so Arizona and Denver became very similar for me after a while, and I would be able to apply the same processes. Now, one thing that's different is Colorado and our law changes. We have a new one every 5 seconds, and it's really hard to kind of keep up on it and make sure you're making these process changes as quickly as you need to, and be risk averse, because every client is different in what they want. I was working with 5 different clients at one point, and they all feel differently about a law. And I'm like, okay, well, here are your options. And that's my job, is to present options. And so in Arizona, though, minimal law changes. We're still doing what we want to do, and life is easy. So, Montana, I still need to understand Montana. I need to go there. I need to go look at the comps, look at my properties, really see what's going on, look at the talent I have working there, and then start to decide, okay, how do I triage that? How do I decide what's more important to learn first versus last, and kind of set up my own training schedule on Montana. It is very different from Denver. It's a very, steady market, where Denver is a lot of volatility. So I've been told that those properties run a little bit easier out there, because there's just less movement overall.
Well, there wouldn't be that many new buildings.
No, there's not. And that's what I'm told. Yes. I mean, obviously this is all just speculation, is what I'm being told, but I'll jump in and I'll kind of feel it out and see what I need to do. And then of course I do my best to make sure I have consistency. So if there are differences, I got to maintain those, but I also can find a way to be consistent with it also, so that it's not, okay, here's my set of rules for this market, here's my set of rules for this market. So I try to find the overlapping areas, I guess.
So is your leader the VP?
Yeah.
Okay. And so he or she looking for?
I mean, she wants someone that can just run it, like come in and run with it. And
Yeah.
I think that's what she found in me. And that was what I was most excited about, because I work for these companies that are that smaller size because I like to have a voice. And I like to have an impact. Doesn't mean I need my answers right all the time, but I like to be heard and I like to be valued. And so, you know, when she was searching for this role, it was really important to her to find someone that matched the team culture that they have, because they do have so much tenure. And so you don't want to rock the boat and come into a company and change everything when they already have a really solid group of people who are incredibly smart. I mean, a few of them were actually presenting today, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And so they want someone that can really vibe with the culture from day one. And that was a lot of what those questions were during my interview process. And then they referenced their core values during that process as well. You know, here's how these things all relate to us. And so, but yeah, she wants someone to come in, take it over, give the team the time they deserve. Because I mean, as we grow and get busy, I mean, our time is so valuable and we can't always give people what they need. And so they're in a place of growth right now. And so putting me in this role will allow me to be on site more time than she was able to, which is going to be a benefit to everybody, including her, so that she can take on more strategic initiatives with the corporate office.
Right. So you take a look at your key KPIs around the tenure and the tenure and reviews. Do you, like, I'm sure you've done a scan of what you need to work on. Is there opportunities out there?
Oh, there's always opportunity. I mean, I think the biggest thing right now is, like, looking at Denver, is we are saturated. There are lease ups you're competing with every 5 seconds. I was in that lease up world for the last 5 years. Now I'm back and stabilized. And it's a really nice change for me, not only for my own work-life balance, but just in shifting mindset and getting back to something I did, you know, 7 years ago. And so with that, I'm walking my properties and I'm okay, here's opportunity. Here's what we're doing. You know, one of them I walked the other day, leasing's going a little bit slow, walked units. I'm like, we have a make ready problem. You know, and that's so easy to fix. And I love when their problems are easy to fix. They just need attention. And so manager's actually here this week also. And so I went, spent the day with this team, walked units, got back, here's a list, got the team excited. And they were already excited to be there. They're happy people, but it's, how do we fix this and how do we do it quickly? And so that was my job. I went in there and I said, here's what we're going to do. Low cost, no cost, but we can do it quick and easy. It's just paying attention to the details. And like 2 of the things we figured out was caulking bathrooms. Like a fresh line of caulk makes such a difference when someone walks in, because it feels clean.
It looks, it pops.
And then painting baseboards, a fresh white coat on baseboards looks a lot different than something that's just been wiped off. These are such tiny things, but when you have high volume turnover, details can be forgotten because you're just trying to get everything done and get people moved in, but then everything else starts to suffer as a result of that. And so it was exciting to go in and be like, guys, this is so easy to fix. Like we got this. Here's our game plan. Here's how everyone's going to be involved. And I think that's where the excitement came from for them, because it was, no one's in trouble. No one's mad. We just got to shift gears a little bit and we will fix this.
Did they acknowledge, like, before you brought to the attention, was that understanding that make ready was busted?
It already has been talked about a little bit, but I mean, it's the time to get in there and walk the units. And my sole purpose that day was to go walk the units. And then I grabbed one of the lead maintenance techs and said, hey, come talk with me. We're spitballing ideas back and forth. And he's like, oh yeah, I've talked about that. Oh, we did this. Okay, cool. I'm going to try this. And I was like, here's some links. Here's, you know, where you can find this information. And so all it took was getting on site, looking at things, and putting a focus on them. And again, with Jamie hiring me and kind of, I have more time in my schedule than she has in hers, just given the volume of our jobs, I can spend more time continuing to follow up on that, holding people accountable and making sure that items that we talk about are executed timely.
So when you think about like the opportunities that are out there, like this example here, I mean, what I find interesting in terms of like bringing forth innovation or new ways of doing things, right? It's like, it's typically about trying to solve a problem that's preventing people from achieving their goals, right? And so like, or a blocker, is kind of the language. Were you in your time at Embry, you haven't been in center space long enough, but like, was there ever high growth? Was there a high growth period when you were there? Like we're adding 25% more units a year?
Oh God, yeah. So my markets, I mean, I had 7 lease ups in the last 12 months. And so because construction delays, so they're not supposed to be that quick, but then they all kind of line up together. You know, 2 buildings in Denver opened up at the exact same time. And thankfully I had a regional in Denver to help support those. But Arizona, that's why I traveled so much, because I had 3 back-to-back there. And so it was just constant. And it's, you know, when you are in a company that is the 12 to 15,000 units or whatnot, your bottom line matters to your growth. It's not always comparable to the people that you have. Your units might grow faster than the amount of people you bring on. And that's where the challenge comes from, because then we are bearing all this additional weight, all this additional work. We know we'll get there when we get the unit count that makes sense to get another regional or get another support person. But it just takes time, because, you know, you got to report up. You have a bottom line. You got to watch expenses. You got to be, you know, cost prohibitive sometimes. And so you have to be really thoughtful in that process. And so lease ups are high volume and they're a lot of work. I mean, the brain power it takes, I feel like, just to do it over and over again. And thankfully I did so many that it was just, rinse, repeat for me at some point, but it still takes a lot of energy. And then on top of that, you're maintaining relationships, not only with your people, but with the customers, because if you have a delay, everyone's impacted.
Right. I keep hearing like lease up nightmares right now.
Yeah.
Like where it's like people are trying to figure out like the absence of people in the marketplace to be able to do the work. And so all of a sudden you pick up 25% of capacity for your region, and you don't know where to get the people from. And so you're borrowing from your existing companies, your existing building authority, and then that's causing stress for them. And like, it's obviously where, I mean, there's 500,000 units coming online this year.
Right. Well, and I think it's also the people is that there's other industries where wages are being raised. Costco, for instance, starts at $30 an hour.
Yeah.
And Arizona is a great example. It is so hot in Arizona. It's about the same temperature it is here.
Yeah.
I can go work in a warehouse and make $25 an hour at Target versus working on site where maybe the wage is different, but the work is so much more. And you're outside and you're in and out and you're dealing with residents. And it's on call. Yeah. So, I mean, there's some undesirable pieces of our industry, but we can make them desirable if we take care of our people. And I think one thing that I've noticed in the last couple of years is our wages have drastically increased. And we're really saying, okay, we'll pay a higher dollar, but the person coming in has to be able to earn that and be relevant to the experience that we need for it. But there's a lot of folks out there that want to come in with no experience to a role that's not necessarily entry level. I can train almost anything if you have the right attitude, but we're also lacking the right attitude sometimes. And I think that's what's making it really challenging. Office is easier than the maintenance side, which again is why the associations are so great, because like Denver Association has the MAP program, which is for a maintenance apprentice. They go 4 days at the property and then 1 day of school for 6 to 8 weeks, I want to say. Then we have the option to hire them on, but we're able to see how their work ethic. Do they show up on time? Are they reliable? Are they learning on the job? And so that's been really helpful to bring people in where they're not just entry level. They have a skill set they're bringing with them. So it's been a really great program. I can't say every single person I've had has been a win out of it, but I've had a handful that have been.
Well, it's I think what's also emerging, like we just discussed earlier, is that this career path that's emerging from a maintenance perspective, I'll say an asset side of things, right? Because that asset, the path, like ultimately, there's going to be budgets that are involved. There's going to be math involved. There's going to be financial accountability that's involved. Like I spoke with a guy last night. He'd been with Con Am for 30 years, VP, and he started as a painter. Yeah. Right. And so he's painting for like whatever it was a linear foot, and ultimately end up getting to where he is right now. But it's like, every day is trying to seek it and understand what's going on in that job, right? And I think there's also an opportunity for people, like, because turnover is so high, if you do stick with it and stick with that company, you're going to eventually be the most senior person. Yeah. Like sometimes in case less than a year, right? You'll be the most senior person there. So stick with it and understand there's a whole career path that's emerging to manage these assets.
And that's what so on that note, I'll go ahead and plug our project that we're working on. So I'm on the board, and in our meetings every single year. This year we did a project called Park Tank, because Park Pettigrew is our president. And so we called it Park Tank. And at our retreat, we said, okay, we're all on these teams, come with an idea, present it. You have, 3 to 4 minutes with the sharks, and then they're going to let you know if they're going to invest in you. So our project with my team got an investment of $30,000 or $25,000, I want to say. And it's called industry storytelling. And what we did is we have a videographer that's really going to come in, meet these people that we've selected, our interview candidates. They're going to talk about their career path, how they got in the industry, what training they have, what opportunity they've had. Some are at the corporate level, some are at the maintenance, some are office, some have crossed over into both sides of it. And so the whole goal of that project is to showcase what this industry has to offer, because one, some people don't even find us because they have no idea what we do, and we need to make sure we're more vibrant in sharing that part of the story. And then we also need to make sure that we're showcasing the path that you can have with us, because there really is unlimited growth. The amount of people I know that started entry level that are climbing the corporate ladder is an impressive number at this point.
It's mind-boggling.
It is, but I didn't know that when I started as a leasing agent. I had no idea that was there.
Well, it gets to the whole thing. It's by accident a very inclusive industry. Yes. Right, and so it is. The story is not told very often. Adrian's starting to do something like this right now too, around the stories around the people that are in multifamily. Yep. Because like it is a really, there's tons of bootstrapping opportunity there if you want to if you're, I say willing to put the work in. I think if you're just willing to commit to it, and learn.
Well, and the relationships you get from it. Like, I posted on my LinkedIn this week when all my friends were all in the same flight coming to NAA, because we're all in this industry. Like my best friends are all here with me by default, because we all work, in multifamily. Some of us started at Greystar, some of us were at Gables. Like some are suppliers. And that's the best feeling in the world when you get to travel and go to conferences with your best friends, but you're also working. Like that's such a cool experience. And so this industry, like you said, it's very inclusive. but it's also it's relationship based. And we have lifelong friends in this industry. And I love that. Like I wouldn't have half the friends I have wasn't for this industry at this point.
So one of the things we talk about in the show often is objections that get brought up right along the way. So, and it happens in both internal and external roles, right? And so what happens what kind of objections would you have gotten in the past? Like for ideas, like you mentioned the one about the using the lease up data and presenting the idea and executing on it, but you don't have carte blanche to make every single decision out there.
No.
So what's that like? What's that like?
It's also about timing. So it's not necessarily that a project is a bad idea, but is it the right time to execute a project? And I think our industry moves so fast. Sometimes we struggle on the implementation piece, rolling something out to a bunch of different teams. If you do it wrong, it has a very negative impact. And so I think when we do have, objections and things that we need to tweak and change, we also need to make sure that we're being thoughtful of the time of year it's in. Don't roll things out in the summer. That's a horrible time to roll things out. It's our busy season. Roll it out in the winter. Don't do every property. Beta test. Do a couple properties. Make sure it works. Let them work through the kinks. Don't do it at a lease up, or maybe do it at a lease up where you have the strongest team there. You need to be thoughtful about what you're doing and who it's going to in order for a project to be successful or make sense. And so I feel like in our industry, we're very open to change now. That has shifted over the past few years, but it wasn't always like that. Now that we're open to change, it's just about doing it the right way and implementing it the right way. And so a project could be next year we're doing the project, but we talked about it now, we're going to put a pin in it. But I think it's about being vocal. If you stop being vocal, you will stop changing. And
you also miss the timing thing. The timing thing is really important, right? So the timing for introducing the idea. So if you're talking about a project next year, right, then it's introduce the idea now. People think about it, the new one over the summer. Let's get some budget in place. Let's execute on it. Let's sit and watch to see if the circumstances persist for us to do this project. And if they persist, let's go at it.
Exactly. And see what the changes that need to be made. And I think the other piece of it is I made a lot of local changes for me because I was back and forth so much. Regardless of the company was able to make the change, I had to create efficiencies for myself to do my job and do it well. And so, working with Embry, we had in-house construction management and development. Well, those are 3 different companies all working under one roof and trying to navigate each other. And those are tough relationships. Construction is a very high stress job. And it's just hard sometimes because you're also at the mercy of the city when you're building. And, some are better than others. And so I started just creating useful tools that made my job easier. So I could do the rinse and repeat thing when I was opening these buildings. But then of course it comes down to the fact that we are, then I get on a call with everybody. We're doing a download and the new person's on it. And we have to clarify, okay, this is just what Amy does. This is Amy's protocol. If you want to use it, great, but you will not get the same experience with other regionals. Not that it's good or bad. You just may not have the same experience because this is what Amy has to do to get her stuff up and running. So I think that's another way to navigate it too. Like I have obstacles, I have objections. I can put things in place that work just for me as long as, I don't put them in as law. So they're just my useful tools.
And so when you're trying to figure out what kind of back to the first question and this one here, when you're trying to figure out which things to prioritize, given that you've got P&L accountability, right? So there's parts of the business that you don't necessarily control the operations of it all, but you're a stakeholder in the financial results. So how do you influence people that are outside of your, let's say, marketing? Let's say you want to do something, you see a gap in marketing and you have an intuition that something can be done there. And how do you get marketing on board, or how have you gotten marketing on board?
I try to create close relationships with people that I'm going to be working side by side with. Obviously, in lease ups, marketing is number one. On Stabilize at this point, because the market's so saturated, marketing is also number one. So I really try to get involved and make sure I understand what they're doing and what their goal is with it. And then I can give my input from the boots on the ground perspective.
This is funny. So, we were talking, that's selling.
Do what?
That's selling.
It is. Oh, I guess it is selling. It's true. It totally is. Well, I mean, the first time I learned Google Analytics, I learned it from Zillow. I got on a call with Zach and Greg, and I was like, I do not understand Google Analytics. Help me. And so we got them access and they walked me through it. And so my suppliers trained me on how to better evaluate the results they were giving me so I could understand it. And then that helps me work hand in hand with marketing. But the other thing with marketing is over the last few years, because things change so quickly, I look at short-term contracts. Short-term contracts might be more expensive in the immediate because you're paying for 3 months versus a 12-month commitment. But if I don't need it 3 months later, I can make a quick change and I can save my budget because I don't need it for the full 12 months. I'm not going to waste money. And when you have a property, I had one that was 31 units. there's seasonality. It might be one turnover a month or none for 3 months. And so I have to navigate what I'm putting in place and have it make sense for that property's budget. Because I am fiscally responsible for these buildings, and I have to make sure that I'm making smart decisions that are going to keep me in line with my budget. Sometimes we throw caution to the wind and say, screw it. We need it. We need the money. We're going to do it. We're going to go over budget. And that's what makes sense. But there will be times that it ebbs and flows.
I've been having this conversation this week. This is again, NA is great for floating ideas, right?
Oh yeah.
Testing things. And so one thing that I was starting to ask people is because this is really around our marketing. Is okay, what's your priority here? Because right now we're doing a lot of targeting and maintenance and operations and such, because we've done a lot of work targeting roles like yours. And we've, the NOI target, the NOI conversation was getting good conversations at your level, but often we get a delegation saying, yeah, that's great. I see how that could work, but you need to talk to operations and maintenance. Right. And so and then our conversation of operations and maintenance, we talk about NOI, and it was just it's not a priority today. Right. Yeah. And so I came here and I was asking this question about what, talking to maintenance folks and operations folks. What's your priority here? Is it getting the job done, or is it NOI, right? Or is it budget adherence? Yeah. And I say budget adherence because if you're a third party, NOI is not kind of how you're measured, right? And so, and of course everyone answered both, right? I said, well, and I didn't, and I thought about it for in the evening, and I kind of got back the next day, and I was like, maybe a better way to ask this question is this. This is to get your take on this, and actually, and not so much your take, but also an explanation behind it. Asking the operations people, okay, so I asked you a question about what you would choose, and you said I need to have both. And then I asked a question about okay, so what would get you fired? Right. I know I asked you what you want, and you said I'd choose both. Yeah. And okay, so now what would get you fired? Yeah. Not doing the job or not hitting budget. Right. And they're like, well, I never hit budget. Right. No, and our budgets are so conservative right now too. Right. So then the answer is that it's getting the job done. Yeah. Right. So their priority is to get the job done. So this conversation in terms of helping folks out and what they're trying to understand what their priority is. Yeah. How is that mentality landed? Given that your role is about the P&L, that is your job, right? Yep. And so when you're looking to get people to move outside of they're your peers. They're not. You can't just say, well, that's a bad prospect. I'm gonna go to the next one. Right. This is someone you're living with. You know. And so how do you then frame your ideas when you're trying to get one of your peers to change? Yeah. Well, I think it's understanding the end goal. I guess I'll kind of go with a more client answer. So all of clients are writing the budget every year, and Arizona, again, tough market. It's very conservative out there, got more conservative than Denver did. And, we had to go through and say, okay, what's more important, your occupancy or your revenue or both? What does that look like? Because I'm going to structure your budget differently depending on what you tell me. Center Space runs a lot of their properties. They want to be 95+%. I didn't do that previously because that told me I was leaving money on the table. But right now, keeping occupancy, keeping a steady revenue stream is more important so that we can make sure we're taking care of the asset and have money to take care of the asset. And then it's also evaluating projects. When we just talked last week, landscape's necessary. You need curb appeal. But this right here, we don't have any life safety issues at the playground. So we're gonna hold off on that because there's no problem. It just could be a little prettier. Maybe I'm gonna send my maintenance to go to get mulch for this from Home Depot, and we'll do it in-house. You do have to get creative and thoughtful because I am answering to someone. I do have to be conservative on my budget, and everything's important. And so I think it's the cost benefit analysis. You're weighing what makes the most sense and how you can do it and presenting different ideas. And I think that's the other part of my job is I have to be solution oriented. I have to provide solutions. I have to provide opportunities for outcomes of different in different ways that can be agreeable to different people, because they might not like what I'm doing, but we can certainly find a compromise to get there and achieve the same result. So given your personality type and how we kind of open the conversation, there's been times you've gotten the no. Oh, of course. Always. Absolutely. Yes. And what's that like? What happens there? It sucks. I think I've learned over the years, it is just a no. You can get creative and you can represent when you get there. Yeah. I mean, it's defeating sometimes because I'm also I'm on Enneagram. I probably heard me talking about this with Chris and Adrian. I'm an 8. I'm assertive. I'm aggressive sometimes. Yeah. I'm very direct. No, and so, by nature, I have to really pull myself back sometimes and not be bitter when someone tells me no and receive information positively. I'm like that in my personal life too. Yeah. And so I've really tried to say, okay, it's a no. Is it a no, not right now? Or is it a no, this is a horrible idea? So they're two very different things, right? If it's a no, it's a horrible idea. I got to go back to the drawing board and figure out a better way to get this initiative across. So, but a no, not right now just means timing. Yeah. So, and then give that they're your peer.
Mhm.
Like it's time, and maybe the time will reveal that it was not the best priority.
Right. Well, and it's also the fact that we all work for different clients. We all work for different properties. We have different people and our needs are different. And so that was the other thing. When we were writing the budget template for Embry, like we would reevaluate every year. What do we need to get rid of? What do we want to add? What's going to make things easier? And you put 5 regionals on a call and we're like, well, I want this. Well, I want this. I'm like,
Yeah, it's 5 cooks.
This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It is. And so we really had to say, okay, why do you need this? What's the reason behind it? Can it be applied in a large scale, or is this really just for your property? And that's really what it comes down to. Is it singular for you, or is it going to help the masses? And if it helps the masses, it's a lot easier to get across.
So you talk a lot about center space now being stabilization. Like, do you see a lot of lease ups in the future for you guys, or is it going to be?
No, so center space does not do lease ups. I've been told they've come in on the tail end of a few that they purchased when they purchased a property, but lease ups is not their forte. They buy.
It was Embry owners as well.
Embry had some owner managed, but mostly third party. So Embry would. Center space is all owner operated. Yeah. And so there's just a lot of variety in how you do business when you do that. Now there's more control, which is nice, usually less reporting. Life's a little bit simpler when it's owner operated because it's all in-house versus having to report out to multiple clients and everyone wanting a different report cycle. Where I was even going with this statement.
Oh, it was asking about like getting no's. And then we talked about the different dynamic of the owner operator and then the third party.
Oh, we were talking about lease ups.
Yeah, lease ups,
So
we're talking
lease ups. Center space, they're going to keep buying. They're actively buying. They just closed on a property a couple of weeks ago. They're actively trying to get into new markets, and so they do have a growth plan. And that was probably the most exciting thing about my interview process with them is, I get a call from Jamie before I even had an offer, and she's like, "Look, I got approval to tell you what's going on with our company before we hire you on. You have to keep it hush hush though, because our teams don't even know yet." She did that because she saw what I was capable of. She saw that I would add value to center space and to her. And she said, if I don't tell her what's going on with us, she's going to walk away from a good opportunity. Because there's a lot of runway and a lot of growth potential that I can be a part of, but I had to have a little more insight to do it.
Right. Well, and I think also when you say stabilization, it sounds like, hey, we're at whatever, 30,000 units, and we'll stay at 30,000 units, but that doesn't sound like the case.
No. When I say stabilize, I mean just stabilize at the property level, at an occupancy that's maintaining, where if we filled it, we're 94 to 96% on average. Gotcha. No, I think we're all in a pattern of growth right now. If you're a competitive buyer, you can get a lot of property right now. If you're not competitive, good luck. I mean, everything has a price tag. Just depends how much money you want to pay for it.
And it's funny because, like, in given the personality that the person I'm meeting today, right? Like, it's obvious you want to be in an organization that's going to be chasing an arc of growth. Oh, yeah. Because that's going to create opportunity for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. And I like challenges. I like to constantly be moving.
Yeah. And so in those spaces, you see opportunities for change and innovation, right? Because 2,500 units drops in your lap. Yep. You kind of can't do it the old way.
No, you can't. You have to figure it out differently. And I think that's why I've really focused my time on these companies that are that 10 to 15,000 units, because I'm not saying they're going to stay that way forever. They're clearly going to grow. But when you get in at that level, they're structured enough, have enough policies in place. I've worked for companies before that were more in the startup range, and I thought it was going to be a cool experience. It's not a cool experience because you have to be ready to change if you're going to grow, and they weren't ready to change. And so I got into this role, ended up going back to Embry because I got there and I was stop sign. I'm like, that's not what you brought me in for.
Even at the startup level?
Even at the startup level, because there was just, they weren't ready. There was a lot of, and I don't want to talk negatively about them. Obviously, it wasn't a good fit for me, but they were just not in a place of growth that they thought they were. Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting because, like, if you're like, let's say 4,000 units and you had 4,000 units, you doubled. Yeah. Like, for obvious reasons. Right. But like if you're a Greystar, you had 4,000 units.
That's Tuesday.
That's Tuesday.
That's Tuesday. That's a drop in the bucket, right? That's no big deal for a Greystar. Yeah. I mean, but when you take over properties, even at the smaller size company, it's a lot of work. I mean, an acquisition of a property and a takeover is huge. I mean, a full building buy, obviously big. Management takeover, incredibly hard because you have all these people that you're also responding to and making sure you take care of them in the meantime. And then, of course, I talked to this person. I did this. Don't you have record of it? And I'm like, I sure don't, because the conversation never happened. But whatever. Yeah. I'll believe you. We'll figure it out. I got to keep you. So, it's an interesting industry, but I think when we are able to scale practices, it makes it easier to grow. And I think Center Space has a really good handle on that from what I've seen so far.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
So looking back at your career, your life, maybe even considering people who you're bringing in onto right now, or people that you're meeting right away, right? Like, what piece of advice would you give yourself 15 years ago?
Well, I've never been afraid to speak up, obviously. So I would give myself that same advice. Never be afraid to speak up. Just learn your audience and learn how to phrase it the right way. I think I probably wouldn't have been as bold maybe early on in my career. So I would say maybe take a step back, reevaluate a little bit and learn your audience first. I think that would be a good piece of advice for me. But otherwise, I would say start making those relationships early on. I think I'm as successful as I am today because of the relationships that I started building and my involvement with the association and my involvement in committees and maintaining these friendships that I have. And early in my career, it didn't make sense for me. It wasn't necessary at the site level. Now I do think it's necessary at the site level, or maybe my perspective on it has shifted. And so we are in the business of relationships, and that is with our residents, it's with our peers, it's with our suppliers. We are only as good as those relationships are. And I love that I have those to support me, to support my friends, to benefit my industry, to benefit who I'm working for. And so I would tell early Amy, start those relationships early on and maintain them. But give those people time. It's like you and I we just started talking like 2 weeks ago and look at us now. It's like we're best friends. But I think it's really important to get to know people and step outside your comfort zone. Adrian was wonderful. So when I originally signed up for his podcast, I had just, my position was obviously gone at Embry. I was being humbled hardcore really fast.
That's tough.
It was really tough. And I said, I don't know that this is the right time for me to do this podcast. I'm a little nervous because I was in my own head, obviously. He reached out, he goes, actually, Amy, he goes, I think it's the best time for you to do it. Put your name out there, talk about it. People really enjoy hearing, kind of stories of what's going on. And like the comeback stories are always the best ones. And it was really reassuring to hear him and Chris say that information to me just out loud, because it, but you need to hear it sometimes. And so I love that relationship that he created with me off the bat, made me feel warm and welcome. And I'm so glad I did that podcast, because then it opened doors for me to be comfortable taking meetings. I'm going to go grab coffee with you. I can't give you any business right now, but you know what I do have? I have a book of business. I have my client list, my relationship. So I am still of value, just in a different way.
Very empowering.
It is. And that was hugely empowering for me. The 3 months off was great, but I still stayed involved. I still worked on my projects with the association. I still ran my committees. I still engaged in these conversations. And I think that is why those relationships are so important. Like, have the coffee talk, like just go do it. Like Tony Sousa, for instance, he was like, David Shaw from Lively is in town. Go meet him and Sarah. And I was like, would love to. Sat and got coffee with them, learned about Lively. Freaking awesome product.
They're great.
They're amazing. And so it was just cool learning about that. But again, nothing to give, but something that could end up being something down the road.
It's interesting. It's interesting the way you put it that way. What I found is that not only to be ready to give, though, but we do have to prepare ourselves to receive. And that sometimes is uncomfortable.
Oh, it is.
Right.
I actually had 2 vendors specifically that I have really great relationships with. And, while I wasn't working, I was enjoying the time off. So I was actually cool not having anything to do with like I guess physical work, we'll call it. But they both reached out and they were like, hey, we'll pay you commission if you want to do referrals for us in the meantime. And I was like, I love that you see value in that for me, but I'm also not going to do that because I want to take my break right now. But it's also like, well, I don't need the money. Why would I do that? But it was just the thought process that they still saw value in me. And again, it was a confidence booster for me. And so I can receive from that too. And it was really nice.
So stay bold.
Stay bold. Learn your ish.
Bold-ish.
Yeah, bold-ish.
Be authentic.
Yep.
Right.
I have that. Be fearlessly authentic.
There you go. That's hard to miss. That one,
there you go.
And then and foster those relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the most important piece of it. And I laugh because no one obviously could see it, but I do have a tattoo that says, well, be fearlessly authentic on this wrist. It's not showing up in the camera. And then I have a silly goose on this one. So I could not be more myself if I tried.
Skateboarding or
it's on a snowboard.
All right.
Because I broke my wrist on a snowboard about 3 years ago. And it was in that moment I realized I need to be a better trainer because I broke my wrist and I can't even type right now. So yeah, I've learned so many lessons in the past few years. But I love this industry. I'm so passionate about it. It's so fun.
Outstanding. So who should we have on next?
Oh God. Who should you guys have on next? I think I want to see more suppliers. I want to see more suppliers on these podcasts because I think they have such value. There's actually one in particular, Quentin Graves with Scout Security. It's a relationship that I built with him for the last probably year, 2 years, maybe. He's on the security side, but he's an entrepreneur. He wants to open new businesses and he's in the process of trying to figure out what those businesses are. And I think he just has such a value because he digs in and wants to understand versus just open. He wants it to make sense. Like we went and got coffee. We'd known each other for a year, finally met after a year, went and got coffee. We were there for 2 hours. Like it's just, he's so easy to talk to and he's so smart and so thoughtful. And he's a relationship builder also.
Very good. Okay. Well, we'll reach Quentin Graves.
Yep.
Okay. Quentin Graves, you've been named.
He's up. I love that I did that too.
All right. Well, we'll reach out to him. We'll connect. Might get an
Awesome.
introduction there. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, they can. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. Everybody knows me on
That's
LinkedIn.
right.
Apparently, I'm a little local celebrity. I call myself. So LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. I'm very active on LinkedIn, but also, I mean, through Center Space. I mean, you'll see me everywhere.
That's
So
outstanding.
yeah,
Especially if you're in the Billings, Montana area.
exactly. Yeah, in Denver, you'll see me running around. Billings, we'll see where I go when I'm there, but I'm excited.
Outstanding. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing up. That
All
was
right.
awesome. That was
Thank you. This
awesome.
was a great time.
Well,
Appreciate
that's
you.
worse. Let's do this. That's
Awesome.
better. All
Here
right.
we go.
Thanks everybody for listening today. Thank you everyone for joining in. If you're listening to this live, well, if you're listening to this after live, feel free to check in comments in the LinkedIn live. We'll both get notifications and jump on and answer. Podcast will be out in a week. It'll be a blog article out in a week or so. You always come out there, and obviously we always appreciate engagements on that. Thank you, Amy, today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. This was great, and apologize for the voice. So here we are. We're gonna do it all again tonight. It's gonna be awesome.
Reload.
We got Ludacris tonight.
Luda.
Luda.
At the Sphere, right?
No, he's at Zook.
At Zook, okay.
Resorts World. Yes.
Okay, very cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening today. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. If you're at NAA, for Amy at
come find us at Luda.
At Luda. See you everyone. Take care. Bye. That was awesome.